It was my son's wedding day, and just when I thought everything was going perfectly, she did it. In front of everyone, his fiancée called me low class during her speech. I could feel the sting, the humiliation like a slap to the face. Maybe you've been there too. Ever been pushed too far? Tell me about it in the comments. The drive home felt longer than it ever had before. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly I thought I might break it. The wedding had gone so smoothly until she opened her mouth. Sarah, my son's fiancée, stood there in front of all our friends and family, and without a second's hesitation, she called me low class. A casual insult, but one that hit deeper than anything I could have imagined. I didn't say a word. Not in front of everyone. But I could feel the words searing into me. They weren't just an insult. They were a dismissal of everything I had done for my son, everything I'd given up to raise him, to make sure he had a future. And there she was, tearing it all down with just a few words. The car hummed in the silence as I drove, my thoughts racing. Do I say something? Do I confront her now? But I didn't. What would be the point? I couldn't let myself lose control, not in that moment, not in front of everyone. But I also couldn't just walk away from it. I glanced over at the passenger seat where the wedding gift I had carefully chosen sat untouched. I had spent hours picking it out, thinking about how it would make their life better, more comfortable. And yet, I had been reduced to a joke in front of them all. But then there was Daniel, my son, standing next to her, nodding along. He didn't even look at me after the speech. Not even a glance. Was he embarrassed by me? I pulled into my driveway and cut the engine. Everything felt off. The small comfort of my home, which used to bring peace, now felt suffocating. The walls seemed to close in. I had always tried to do the right thing for my son, staying in the background, not interfering, giving him the freedom to make his choices. But this was different. I didn't know how much longer I could stay silent. The phone buzzed in my pocket. Catherine, a colleague, and someone I thought was a friend. She had always been direct with me. Her message came through before I even unlocked my phone. You can't keep doing this to yourself, John. You need to deal with it. You need to stop letting her walk all over you. This is your life, your son, your dignity. Don't lose that over one woman's words. I didn't reply right away. The words hit, though. She was right. Sarah had pushed me too far. But I had never been the type to escalate things. I was always the one who waited, who bided my time. But now it felt like the time to make a choice. The ringing of my phone snapped me back to reality. Another call, this time from Daniel. He wanted to talk about the wedding. But the moment he spoke, I knew it wouldn't be about what happened. He was avoiding the truth, avoiding me. I pressed my thumb to the screen, silencing it. The silence crept back in. Maybe I had to let it go. Maybe it was time to stop pretending. The house felt too small. Every room, every corner seemed to close in on me. I couldn't shake what had happened at the wedding. Sarah's words replayed in my mind over and over, a constant loop. She hadn't even flinched as she said it. And my son Daniel stood there silent, like he was watching a show, and not his own family falling apart. I dropped my keys on the table and stood there for a moment, letting the silence wash over me. My eyes caught the framed photo of Daniel and me taken years ago, when he was just a kid. He used to look up to me, rely on me. What had happened? How had we gotten here? The phone buzzed on the counter. I didn't even need to look at the screen to know it was Catherine, my colleague. A friend, though I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep calling her that. She had been a voice of reason before always telling me to speak up when things weren't right. But that was before everything blew up with Sarah. Now I wasn't sure anyone was really on my side. I picked up the phone and pressed it to my ear. "John, we need to talk," Catherine said, her voice tight with concern. What's there to talk about? You can't keep ignoring this. You've been quiet too long, she insisted. You know she's trying to make you look like a fool, right? And Daniel, he's not helping. He's letting her control everything. I rubbed my hand over my face. It wasn't easy to hear her say it, but I knew she was right. I don't know what to do anymore, I said, the frustration clear in my voice. If I make a scene, what happens, then I lose him completely. Maybe you already have, she replied, and her words stung. But you need to stand up for yourself. This isn't just about her. It's about you. Your dignity. Don't let her keep you down. Her words hung in the air. She was right. But confronting Sarah, confronting Daniel, that wasn't something I could just walk into blindly. I can't just jump into it, Catherine, I said, my voice low. If I make a move, I have to be sure. You don't have to go in guns blazing, she answered. But if you keep quiet, you're giving them permission to walk all over you. I pressed the phone to my ear, letting her words sink in. I hadn't even realized how much Sarah and her influence had already started to shape my world. There was no doubt anymore that she was trying to rewrite the rules, trying to push me out. I'd let it go for far too long, and now I was paying the price. The conversation ended, but the silence didn't feel quite as oppressive anymore. Catherine had made her point. But it didn't make things easier. I didn't have the answers. What if I acted and lost everything? What if standing up to Sarah meant pushing Daniel even further away? My son had always been my responsibility, my pride. What was left if I lost him too? I set the phone down and paced the room. It wasn't just Sarah I was worried about. It was Daniel. He wasn't the same kid who had looked up to me. He was different now. Detached. And I had no idea what had changed him. Is it her? The thought gnawed at me. But I couldn't just blame her. There was more to it than that. I thought about the wedding again, the look on Daniel's face when Sarah made her speech. It wasn't anger, not exactly, but it wasn't support either. It was like he had decided to let her do the talking for both of them. I was being left behind. The phone buzzed again. This time it was Daniel. I almost didn't answer. But I had to. For him. Dad, his voice came through, barely audible. I know you're upset. But we need to talk. What's going on, son? Can we just talk without all the drama? He said, his tone already defensive. I knew where this was going. He didn't want to hear the truth. I'm not here for drama. Daniel, I said, my voice steady but tired. I'm here to make sure we don't fall apart completely. He didn't respond. The silence on the other end of the line spoke volumes. It was more than enough for me to know things weren't going back to the way they were. I found the envelope on my doorstep the next morning. The thick paper was white plain and didn't have a return address. At first I thought it was another piece of junk mail, but when I opened it, the letter inside was different. It was a report, an article written about me and Sarah, and it claimed that everything I believed had been a misunderstanding. The words hit me hard. It's possible that Sarah never intended to humiliate you. Perhaps your own insecurities clouded the situation. I didn't know what to think. Was this a sign of an apology, or just another manipulation? I read the lines again, slower this time, but the doubt in my mind only grew stronger. I had spent the last few days blaming Sarah for everything but this. This was different. Could I have been wrong? The article sounded plausible, even convincing at first glance. Could I have jumped to conclusions? Was I too quick to judge? It made me question myself, something I hadn't done in years. My gut told me one thing, but now there was a whisper of doubt that refused to go away. My own thoughts were spinning in circles, wrestling with the idea that I might have overreacted. Maybe I was wrong to feel so attacked. Maybe Sarah wasn't the villain I had painted her to be. But as soon as I started questioning myself, the nagging feeling came back. I had heard what I had heard. It wasn't just a misunderstanding. Sarah's behavior had been deliberate. Her words, her actions, they couldn't just be written off as some accident or bad timing. Tried calling Daniel again, but there was no answer. Not that I was surprised. He had been avoiding me ever since the wedding. Maybe it was easier for him to side with Sarah than to deal with the fallout. I couldn't blame him, but I felt a distance growing between us that was becoming hard to ignore. What had I done wrong? The pressure from every direction was building. At work, people started treating me differently. There were whispers, subtle, but they were there. The colleagues who had once been friendly, eager to collaborate, now looked at me like I was a liability. Even my boss seemed distant. It wasn't overt, but I could tell. There was a shift, a change in the air that I couldn't ignore. And then there was Sarah's network. The people who supported her had already begun to tighten their grip. Conversations were becoming harder to have. The invitations to social events stopped coming. The warm smiles, the cordial greetings, they all seemed to fade away. I was isolated more than I had ever been. Sarah and her supporters were slowly but surely driving a wedge between me and everything I had built. I couldn't just sit back anymore. I knew I had to do something. But what the days passed, and I kept turning over the letter in my hands. It had been days since I first read it, but it still didn't sit right. I couldn't get rid of the nagging feeling that there was something more to it, something I was missing. But I couldn't just let myself be consumed by doubt. So I started collecting pieces. It wasn't obvious at first. No bold moves, no glaring actions, just small things, moments where Sarah acted a little too comfortable, a little too rehearsed. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something she was hiding. One afternoon, I took a walk through the neighborhood, hoping the fresh air would help clear my mind. As I passed a small cafe, I saw one of Sarah's friends from the wedding sitting by the window talking to a woman I didn't recognize. They spoke in low voices, but I could catch a few words, reputation control Dan's father. The tone of the conversation was enough to make my heart race. I stopped pretending to tie my shoe, but my ears were tuned in. They were talking about me. They were strategizing, planning something. My mind immediately started running through possibilities. Had Sarah been manipulating Daniel? Had she been weaving a story, painting me as the villain to get him on her side? The more I thought about it, the more the pieces began to fall into place. It wasn't just that she had insulted me at the wedding. It was everything she had done before behind closed doors. Sarah wasn't just trying to control Daniel. She was trying to control everyone, me included. Later that night, I started going through my old files looking for anything I could use. Emails, messages, receipts, anything that would give me a glimpse of the truth. But I couldn't help but feel like I was walking into a trap. What if I was wrong? What if I was just overreacting? But as I clicked through the folders, one email caught my eye. It was from Sarah, sent the night of the wedding, just hours after everything had gone down. The subject line was simple, "For your eyes only." Clicked on it without hesitation. Sarah had been playing a game, and now I had the proof I needed. The first blow came in the form of a public post shared across her social media. The words bold and unrepentant burned through my phone screen like acid. After years of tolerating John's mistreatment, I can no longer stand by. It's time to expose the real truth about what's been going on in our lives. His behavior has always been toxic, and he's made a career out of lying to everyone around him. The post didn't just stay on Sarah's profile. It spread like wildfire, picked up by people who didn't know the whole story, by people who had no context, but loved a juicy scandal. I felt my stomach twist into knots as I read the comments one after another, people accusing me of things I hadn't done, of a person I hadn't been for years. There were even claims about my job, about how I had climbed the corporate ladder by stepping on others. I had spent years working hard to build a reputation, and in one reckless move, Sarah had shattered it. I could feel the weight of it pressing against me, her words, her accusations, the subtle power behind them. In a way, I wasn't just being attacked by her. I was being attacked by everything she had carefully cultivated, a narrative, a truth that wasn't mine, but would be believed by many. I didn't answer right away. I couldn't. I needed time to think, to process the shock of it. Sarah had crossed a line, but if I reacted too quickly, I would only play into her hands. She wanted me to lash out. She wanted to see me crumble, but I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. The silence stretched on for what felt like days. I stayed in my office at home, scrolling through the comments, seeing the damage piling up. Every word she'd written dug deeper into me, cutting through my self-control like a knife. Daniel hadn't reached out to me yet, and I could only guess at what side he was on. Was he standing with her now? Would he even stand up for me if things escalated further? The next morning, the fallout came quicker than I expected. Sarah had done more than just post a rant online. The damage was spreading into my professional life. I opened my inbox to find an email from my boss, a simple subject line. "We need to talk." I didn't wait for the meeting. I called her first. "Janet, what's going on?" I asked, my voice steady, despite the tightness in my chest. "John," she said, her voice strained. "There's been talk about you. Some things have come to light, and we're concerned. We need to discuss this in person. You understand, don't you?" I let out a breath, closing my eyes for a moment. Sarah had done this, hadn't she? The smear campaign was no longer confined to social media. It was infiltrating my career, my entire life. "I'll come by," I said, my voice calm, but the fire growing in my gut. "But let's make one thing clear, Janet. Whatever you've heard, none of it is true." The call ended, and I sat there for a few moments, letting the weight of what was happening sink in. Sarah hadn't just gone after me personally. She had aimed at everything I had worked for. My career, my reputation, my relationships. They were all on the line. At the office, things had already started to shift. I saw the glances people gave me when I walked into the conference room, the hesitation when I spoke. My credibility was crumbling, and Sarah was the one tearing it apart, piece by piece. She knew exactly what she was doing, manipulating the story, twisting the truth, and making me the villain. I spent the next few hours gathering every piece of evidence I could find. Emails, notes, records of conversations, anything that could help me fight back. But I couldn't just rely on what I had. Sarah had gotten to my network, my colleagues. She had poisoned the well, and that meant I needed to be more strategic. It wasn't just about defending myself anymore. It was about taking back control from her, about showing everyone who the real manipulator was. I walked out of my office, grabbed my coat, and headed straight to the conference room to meet with Janet. As I walked through the hallways, I thought about the consequences, about what was at stake. The hardest part wasn't going to be facing Sarah or even the damage she'd done. It was confronting the truth. Daniel wasn't a kid anymore. He had made his choice. And now it was up to me to figure out how to fix everything she had broken. It came in an anonymous envelope tucked under my door, like a secret someone was trying to bury. At first glance, I thought it was just another piece of junk mail, but when I tore it open, it felt like a punch to the stomach. The letter inside wasn't some random advertisement or bill. It was a carefully detailed account of Sarah's past things I had never known, things I had never even imagined. The letter revealed more than just hidden secrets. It painted Sarah and her family in a light I had never seen before. They weren't the well-mannered, charming people they pretended to be. Sarah had been involved in manipulative schemes long before she ever met me. The document was filled with stories of her controlling behavior, her hidden connections, and the lies she had spun to secure her place in Daniel's life. It made everything click into place. Things I had missed. Things I had ignored because I wanted to believe in the good in people. I stared at the paper in my hands, the words blurring together. I had been played, but I had been blind to it, too busy trying to hold on to what I thought I had: my family, my reputation, my son. And now the truth was crashing into me with brutal clarity. The envelope wasn't the only thing that had come my way. Later that evening, I received a voicemail from an old friend, Mark, a guy I hadn't spoken to in years. He left me a simple message, but it was the kind that felt like a warning. "John, it's Mark. Listen, I don't know if you're aware, but Sarah is dangerous. She's been pulling strings behind your back, manipulating everyone. I've got something you need to hear. I couldn't believe it at first, but after everything that had been happening lately, I was willing to listen to anything that might shed light on what was going on." I called him back immediately, my mind racing. "Mark, what's going on?" I asked, barely able to contain the urgency in my voice. "Meet me at the old bar, the one we used to go to. I'll explain everything, but you have to trust me," he said before hanging up. I didn't hesitate. I had to know what was really going on. I had to hear the truth. When I walked into the dimly lit bar later that night, Mark was already sitting in a booth in the back. He looked older, a little rough around the edges, but his eyes were sharp, the same as they used to be. "What's this all about?" I asked as I sat across from him. He leaned in, lowering his voice. "You remember those deals Sarah was always involved in? The ones she kept on the down low? Well, she's been doing more than just making her way into the family. She's been involved in some shady business, and she's been using you and Daniel to cover it up." I felt my blood run cold as he spoke. "What do you mean, shady business?" "She's got connections," he continued. "People from her past, people who can make things disappear. She's been hiding it, using it to climb up in the social and corporate circles. She's been playing you, man." Every word he said confirmed the suspicions I hadn't let myself voice. But now it was all out in the open. My mind went to the meeting with Sarah's supporters, the way they spoke about me. I realized now everything she had done, every move, every choice had been calculated. "I can't just sit here," I muttered, more to myself than to Mark. This is all bigger than I thought." "Exactly," he said, leaning back. "But you've got to stop waiting for things to fall into place. You've got to take control, John." His words hit me hard, and I knew he was right. I had been passive, letting things unfold without taking any real action. I'd been trying to protect what little I had left: my son, my reputation, my sanity. But I realized now that if I didn't act, I was going to lose everything. When I got home that night, the weight of it all hit me like a freight train. My phone buzzed, and I looked down to see Sarah's name on the screen. I didn't answer. I couldn't bring myself to hear her voice, not after everything I had learned. Not after what she had done to me. Instead, I walked to my desk and started gathering everything I had: letters, emails, recordings. I wasn't just going to let her control the narrative anymore. If she wanted to play dirty, then so be it. I would expose her for who she really was. I thought about Daniel, how he had always looked up to me, how much I had given for him to have a good life. I couldn't just let Sarah take him from me, to twist his mind until he couldn't see me for who I really was. It was time for me to stand up, to stop being passive. I picked up the phone again, called Catherine, the one person who had been my voice of reason. "You're right," I said when she picked up. "I can't let this continue. I need to fight back. I'm not going to be silenced anymore." "Good," she replied, her voice steady. "Now go and take back what's yours." The weeks following my decision to fight back felt like a blur. Every day was a new wave of tension, a new challenge. But I knew I couldn't just sit back and let Sarah destroy everything I'd worked for. I had to be strategic. I had to build a plan. I spent the first few days compiling everything I could, Emails, documents, messages, anything that might expose Sarah for who she really was. The pieces started to fall into place. What I had thought were random incidents were actually part of a bigger picture. There was a pattern to her behavior, one that was clear if you were willing to look for it. My emotions had cooled, giving way to something sharper resolve. I had always been the kind of man who kept his emotions in check, but now every decision, every move had to be calculated. I couldn't afford to make any mistakes. Sarah had already shown me how dangerous she was. I wasn't going to give her another chance to tear me down. I spent hours reading over the materials I'd gathered, cross-referencing information, piecing together the details she had tried to bury. The more I uncovered, the more certain I became that I was right to distrust her. She had been manipulating Daniel and me long before I even knew it. She wasn't just after my reputation. She was after control. And if I was going to stop her, I had to be one step ahead. Catherine was the first person I turned to for guidance. She had been my sounding board since this all started. When I called her, she didn't hesitate to offer her help, though she knew the risks. "John, you've got to be careful." She said, her voice steady but concerned. "If you keep going down this path, you're going to expose yourself to a lot more than just Sarah's attacks. She's powerful. You're playing a dangerous game." I know I replied, my voice low. "But I can't sit here and do nothing anymore. If I don't act, I'll lose everything. I can't let her control this story." "You're right," she agreed. "But you have to be smart about it. Don't rush in. Take your time, gather everything, and when the time comes, strike fast and hard. You've got to make sure she can't deny what she's done." Her words gave me the clarity I needed. It wasn't just about responding. It was about controlling the narrative. I had to stay focused. I couldn't let Sarah derail me. But even as I grew more confident in my plan, a part of me still hesitated. What if this wasn't enough? What if the damage had already been done? I couldn't afford to think that way. But doubt crept in every now and then. I needed more help. That's when Mark, an old friend of mine from years ago, came into the picture. I hadn't spoken to him in ages, but when I called, he picked up immediately. He had always been the kind of guy who didn't mince words. If anyone could give me the tough advice I needed, it was him. "John, you're way too passive about this," he said, his tone blunt. "Sarah isn't just going to stop. She's playing a long game and you're letting her. If you want to win, you need to hit her where it hurts legally, socially, professionally. Don't just sit there and react to what she's throwing at you. Take the fight to her." His words landed like a punch. I knew he was right, but there was something about hearing it from him that made it feel more real. I had been reacting to everything she did, but now it was time to take control. "Get me the tools to do it," I said, my voice growing firm. "I need the right legal support, the right connections. If I'm going to fight back, I need to do it the right way." Mark agreed to help me find a lawyer. We didn't waste time. As soon as I hung up with him, I started organizing everything: emails, texts, the documents from the anonymous letter, everything. I had to be ready to build my case. I wasn't going to leave any room for doubt. The next few days were a blur of phone calls, meetings, and late nights spent organizing every detail of Sarah's manipulations. But even as I focused on the legal side, the threats kept coming. At first, they were small, strange emails, unmarked packages with vague notes that didn't make sense. But then the calls started. They weren't threatening, at least not directly. But they were unsettling. Every time I picked up the phone, there was only silence. Someone on the other end breathing, but saying nothing. It was like they were watching me, waiting for me to make a move. The first real threat came one afternoon when I was leaving the office. A car slowed as it passed me, and I saw a shadow move inside. The windows were tinted, but I could see someone staring at me, unblinking. It wasn't just a coincidence. I was being watched. I told myself not to panic, but my heart started racing. This was it. The stakes were higher than I had anticipated. Sarah wasn't just attacking me through social media or rumors. She was escalating things, bringing it to a level I couldn't ignore anymore. The signs were clear. She was trying to intimidate me into backing down. It hit me all at once. A phone call, a single message that twisted everything I had been working for. The email subject line read, "Urgent legal action initiated." The words on the screen blurred, but the meaning was clear. Sarah had filed a formal petition for sole custody of Daniel. She had gone to court using the smear campaign she'd been building against me to paint me as unfit. I could hardly breathe as I sat there stunned by the suddenness of it all. This wasn't just an attack on my reputation, it was personal. The thing I valued most, the one thing I had worked hardest to protect, was now at risk. Daniel could be taken from me. My own flesh and blood, my son gone. I thought about the moments we'd shared, all the years of hard work and sacrifice. Could I lose him over a fight that wasn't even of my making? My stomach churned at the thought. But that wasn't the only blow I took. The next few hours were a blur of phone calls, emails, and text messages. Sarah had moved swiftly, sending a series of damaging statements to my employer. My position at the company was now under review. There were rumors, allegations, and suspicions about my work ethics, nothing specific, just a cloud of doubt swirling around my name. I was being backed into a corner on all fronts. At the office the next day, I walked through the hallways with the distinct feeling that every pair of eyes was on me. The whispers had grown louder. People who had once been friends now avoided me, talking behind my back in hushed tones. The weight of the situation pressed harder. I had always been the one in control, the one who led, who had the answers. Now it felt as if everything was slipping through my fingers. And yet the hardest part wasn't the pressure from work, or even the looming threat of losing Daniel. It was seeing Sarah's smirk every time she posted another subtle jab on social media. It was knowing that she was doing this, knowing the damage she was causing. She wasn't just trying to win, she was trying to break me. But I couldn't let her. Not like this. I returned home that night, my mind clouded, every thought tangled with anxiety. I stared at the documents spread out on my desk, copies of court filings, emails from Sarah's allies, and the text messages where she had manipulated Daniel into believing I was the one who had failed him. But there was one thing she hadn't counted on me. The moment I had feared had arrived, but it was also the moment I realized I had no choice but to fight back. There was no more room for hesitation. I was standing at the edge of a cliff, but I wasn't going to fall. I gathered every piece of evidence I had collected, everything I had kept hidden for moments just like this. The emails, the texts, the recordings I could no longer hide from the truth. I had to make sure the world saw Sarah for what she was. And I would use the law, the system, and every resource I had to do it. The phone rang as I sat there staring at the documents. I didn't recognize the number, but I picked it up anyway. "John, it's Catherine," she said. Her voice was calm, but there was an underlying tension to it. "I know what's going on. I'm going to help you. You can't face this alone, but you need to stay focused." "Thanks, Catherine," I said, feeling a small sense of relief. She had been my anchor in all this. "I've got everything I need. It's time to fight." "I know. But you need to be careful," she warned. "Sarah is going to keep coming after you. And now that she's involving the courts, you need someone who knows how to handle it. I can help you with that." "I've got a lawyer already," I replied, feeling more confident. "Mark is helping me get everything together. But I need to act now, before it's too late." "Just don't lose yourself in this," she reminded me, her voice softening. "Stay focused on the bigger picture. You're doing the right thing." "I know you are." I hung up the phone and sat back thinking about what had to do next. Sarah had moved first, but I wasn't going to let her win. I knew the court case was a battle I couldn't fight alone. Stood up, walking over to the bookshelf where I had kept the family photos. There he was smiling at me from the frame, the boy who had once looked up to me as the person who could do no wrong. The weight of what was happening to him was unbearable. But I wouldn't give up. Not now. Not after everything that had happened. The final blow came when Sarah lost her grip on the story she'd been crafting for so long. The court case ended in a way I hadn't expected she had lost, and Daniel was back with me. But the victory didn't feel as sweet as I had imagined. It didn't bring the relief I had expected. Instead, a heavy, deep exhaustion settled into me. I stood at the threshold of my home, looking out at the life I had built, at the family I had tried so hard to keep intact. Daniel was back, yes. But the cost of it all, everything I had fought for, was much greater than I had realized. I had lost more than just Sarah's manipulations. I had lost the trust of my son. I had lost my own sense of peace. And in some ways I had lost the version of myself that I had been before all of this started. But somewhere deep down, I realized something. Daniel needed me, yes, but I also needed to stand strong, not just for him, but for me. The days after the trial were quiet, but they were filled with a kind of tension. Daniel came back to stay with me, but our conversations were few. The silence between us was heavy, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was more like we were both waiting for something, waiting for a moment of clarity, or perhaps healing. But I knew deep down that it wouldn't be immediate. Sarah's shadow would linger for a while, but it was time to rebuild what I could. I had spent years carrying the weight of others' expectations. I had buried my own desires, my own needs, just to make sure everyone else was happy. I had allowed myself to believe that my purpose was to always protect, to always sacrifice. But now, as I stood at the edge of this new beginning, I knew that wasn't true anymore. The truth was, I had always been capable of standing on my own. I had been capable of deciding who I was without anyone telling me what I should be. I had been so caught up in pleasing everyone around me that I forgot to live for myself. I had forgotten that sometimes the best way to care for those you love is to first care for yourself. I hadn't been the man I wanted to be. But now I was finding my way back. I had started making small changes. I was spending more time doing things I enjoyed. I had always loved hiking, so I began spending weekends on the trails, reconnecting with nature. I took up reading again, revisiting old books that had once given me comfort. And I signed up for a volunteer program helping to teach kids who had lost their way, much like I had before. Slowly, I was carving out a life that felt more like mine, one that didn't depend on anyone else's approval. And as I did these things, Daniel and I began to talk more slowly, repairing the bond that had been strained. It wasn't easy, but it was real. He started opening up about how he felt about the things he had been through. I could see the pain in his eyes, the same pain I had seen in myself. But I also saw something else, hope. Hope that maybe we could start again. Sarah had faded from my life as far as I was concerned. She had received her consequences, whether it was the public backlash or the truth about her manipulations being exposed. I didn't need to see her or talk to her again. Daniel and I were moving on. I was moving on. One afternoon while I was out for a hike, I received a call from Catherine. She had always been there for me, a voice of reason, and as we talked, I realized just how far I had come. "You've changed, John," she said, her voice warm with approval. "And I think you found the peace you were looking for." I paused for a moment. It's not perfect. I'm not perfect. But I'm getting there. You're stronger than you think. You always were. I smiled, feeling the truth in her words. I had spent so long being afraid of losing everything that I hadn't realized I still had so much. I had my son, my integrity, and my freedom. That was more than enough.